You're listening to certified financial planner Doug Goldstein, host of the Goldstein on Gelt Show, www.goldsteinongelt.com.
Okay, I am very excited to have back on the Goldstein on Gelt Show Carolyn Rosenblatt, who is joined today by her husband, Dr. Mikol Davis. The two of them together advise not only regular people like you and me, but they also work with advisors, teaching them how to help clients who are dealing with aging issues. So, Mikol and Carolyn, I want to start with this question about how to talk to aging parents, because it is a very difficult situation. People who have for their whole life been responsible for handling their money and probably handling it well, and they probably have made a lot more money than their kids, and all of a sudden their kids come along and say, hey, Mom, Dad, why don't you let me take over? What's the best approach for dealing with someone in that situation?
Well, it is a very controversial and somewhat conflict situation that boomers, adult kids find themselves when they start realizing that their parents are starting to kind of lose the sharpness that they've had about following up on their finances. And I think the way that we've found to be most effective in approaching that is when you take the onus on yourself, that being Mom, Dad. I've noticed lately when I've come over to visit you that, some of the bills that normally get paid on time seem to be piling up, or I noticed a late notice on the floor in the other room, and I just wondered if this might be a time that I could help you kind of maybe automate the process. There are these things called online banking now that would help to make this process so much easier, and that would give me peace of mind to know that there wouldn't be anything bad that would happen with you, and that would just help me a lot. Would you be willing to let me try?
I just want to clarify, the language you're saying is very much like what a stewardess might say on an airplane when she wants you to strap in or put your iPhone away. She says, would you do me a favor and put this away? Are you using that term on purpose because that's a way to speak to people?
Of course, because what it does is that it puts the onus on yourself versus the approach that many people take, which is basically, Mom, Dad, you've got a problem, you're losing it. And that creates tremendous defensiveness.
Sometimes people say these kind of things, and they do approach their parents very politely and respectfully, like you're saying, but the parents aren't into it. They say, no, it's okay, I'll take care of it. Oh, I just forgot. And they want to push you away. What's the next stage?
Well, I think that what you're saying, Douglas, is very common. There is a big pushback. People don't want to accept that perhaps they're starting to lose their sharpness or are fearful that they're going to become dependent on their kids or someone else. And so I think the secret in what we're dealing with when we get that pushback is to, in fact, persist. To respectfully acknowledge what you heard, that they're not ready yet to have that conversation, but to also let them know that this is a critical enough area, and you've seen people be taken advantage of by others because of, say, financial elder abuse, and we're going to have this conversation again, and then you schedule some time to begin that process again.
Mm-hmm. Well, the financial elder abuse traditionally, or I think unfortunately, more often happens within the family than someone on the outside. Is that correct?
That is, and that is the statistic that shows us that family members are the most frequent abusers. Mm-hmm. Professionals take the most money from them, but it is rather common for the daughter or the son, the grandchild, whoever needs something and sees the grandparent or older person in the family as an easy target because of that trusting relationship.
So the parents are legitimate in thinking that they don't want to give control necessarily because they might be afraid.
They might be afraid, but I think that probably in most families there's at least someone whom they have reason to trust, and that person should be the one that they've appointed on whatever documents would enable another person to have control over the money, like a power of attorney for finances. And it's just really critical to look at those situations again because people change, Doug. The son might have been great when he was in his 20s and Dad did the document, but maybe in his 40s he's addicted to substance and he can't control himself and he needs money. That's where the trouble is. So those documents really should be looked at and reviewed, every few years, let's say, to be certain that things have not changed.
We're talking with Carolyn Rosenblatt, a repeat customer on the Goldstein on Gelt show. If you didn't hear her first interview, you can check it out like you can check out all of our interviews at YouTube. Just look up Goldstein on Gelt and Carolyn Rosenblatt. And she's here with her husband, Mikol Davis. They are experts in helping not only individual families, but also in helping professionals like me, I'm as a financial advisor, helping us to help our clients to deal with the financial anxiety and really the transfer of control. Carolyn, you were mentioning certain documents that need to be reviewed. Talk to me about the documents that people really have to consider.
Okay. Well, there are really two basic areas. One is about money and the other is about health. So with the money, we want to make sure that anybody, even if all you have is one house and a few $100s in the bank, that you have a will and or a trust, because we want to avoid probate. And in most places, you can avoid the expensive going to court that we call probate by having a trust, so that the people you want to leave your money or your house to will get that without having to go through the court. And the other part of that money question is the power of attorney, and it has to be a durable power of attorney, which means that it's good even if you lose your marbles, so to speak. Those need to be updated periodically. And by the way, a power of attorney can be gotten in every state in the United States on the internet, and it's actually a pretty good basic document. It's per state, but they're generally the same. It's free. And the other part of that, which has to deal with health, that aging question, is an advanced healthcare directive, also called a living will, which sets out who you want to be in charge of the decisions about your health if you cannot speak for yourself. It's very important if people become comatose or have a stroke or something happens that they can't talk. And then everybody's got to decide what's going to happen next, communicate with the doctors. That power of attorney for healthcare, or advanced healthcare directive, as we call it here, is also equally important.
Yeah, that's important for people listening in the United States. A lot of our listeners, as you know, are outside the U.S. Many of the people who listen are living in Israel, or certainly they're U.S. expatriates, in which case not all of these documents work the same. If you have expatriated, it's critical that you speak to a legal professional who actually has experience in this to say, well, will my U.S. durable power of attorney still work here? And are there certain conditions? And is there such a thing as a durable power of attorney? Because in fact, in Israel, it simply doesn't work the same. And it's important for people to really get good advice on this, because otherwise you may find out that when your parents are no longer capable of handling it and you go to the local bank with your U.S. power of attorney, they'll just say that we don't recognize that. And that creates, that literally opens up a Pandora's box of legal problems. Let's dive in a little bit more to the difficulties that people have in making smart decisions. You know, a lot of decisions that people make for retirement are a little bit on autopilot. How does a person's mindset or troubles over time of being clear of mind, how does that affect the retirement income decisions that they're making?
Well, what we know is that as, age 65 and older, our faculties to be able to deal with the various ways that we access both long-term and short-term memory and our analytical abilities to make decisions diminishes. And there's no question about it, that it diminishes. So making financial decisions when you're 75 is not of the same level of which that you can make when you're 45. There are things of which that you can do when you're 45 in terms of the speed of which that you can take on new learning and new information kind of on the fly that helps you feed whatever decisions you're making with real-time information and data. As you get older, that becomes much more difficult to be able to take on and take in new information and have that as a part of your financial decision-making process. This then would affect, obviously, the ways of which that you would approach your spending money through retirement. And most importantly, what we see is that people become a lot more impulsive as they get older when they start losing certain faculties and start making poor financial decisions because they don't have the same controls that they did when they were younger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, and I think that many of us, certainly professionals in any field, have seen this as their clients are getting older. But at the end of the day, it's still very difficult to say to someone, it would help me if I'm just trying to use the same words you used. It would help me if you could turn over control. And I'll tell you, in my day job as a financial advisor, if I do see someone beginning to have less interest in handling his money, let's say, I'll often suggest that they bring in their children or some trusted relative who can get more involved. But these are some of the most difficult questions that we have. I see that one of the most difficult things we have now is we're just about out of time, but I know there's a lot more that both of you have to teach on this. In the last few seconds, tell me, how can people follow you and follow your work?
You can follow us on Facebook at Aging Parents and on Twitter at Aging Parent, single, Aging Parent.
All right, we will put a link to that at the show notes at goldsteinongelt.com. Carolyn, Mikol, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you very
Doug.
much.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Check out all of Doug's money ideas at goldsteinongelt.com. Doug specializes in helping people who live outside the United States handle their U.S. investment accounts. If you have a question that you would like answered on the air or off, contact Doug at his website or send him an email to doug@profile-financial.com.